Welcome to my teaching learning session of industrial psychology or organizational psychology. We continue with unit 9 speaking about organizational change. Speaking about organizational change or resistance to change are usually those tendencies in an organization that talks about how do you resist any change or maintain any status quo in an organization. Also, resistance to change does not always lead to negative changes or negative impact. It can also consequently lead to positive impact in an organization. Also, sources that are resistance to change those are individual changes in an organization. Usually whenever people are climbing up the hill or an organization is receiving a lot of projects and important projects and are leading up the hill, or probably they are losing on to their revenue, they're losing on to their employees, there are times that we need to resist some changes. And what are when we want to resist some changes, what are the sources of changes? Some sources are individual and some sources are organizational, which is some change happens because of the individual and some changes happen because of the organization. So the changes that happen because of the individuals are habit. Habit is usually to cope with life complexities, and we rely on habits and ways, our general everyday responses in the world. So those are habits of individuals. Like for example, there are some individuals who have a pattern of working in a stepwise way, where there are some people who jump onto the last content or the last conclusion quickly. So there are different people with different habits, and they rely on these habits to complete a programmed response, to complete a project, which could be a resistance to change for the organization, and it can also be a resistance to change for them. Also, security. People with a high need for security are likely to resist changes because they threaten that if they are getting a new content to do, a new project to do, a new space to move in, it's going to be a little insecure, it's going to be dangerous, it might have qualities or it might have things which might lead to a lot of vagueness, no concrete idea about where they're going, which leads to a lot of insecurity, which pushes them to not pick up things and to not take up the new roles, the new job, the new space. After security, we have economic factors. Yes, economic factors of an individual does resist them to change, like changes in the job task, established work routines. We are sticking to the same routine. There are times where people are sticking to the same organization for a matter of 5 to 10 years and do not plan to shift just because they are stuck to the kind of job opportunities and the kind of job work and the yearly progression and appraisal that they get. They're completely sticking to that, especially when it comes to pay. Usually people are tied to the pattern of being paid and being appraised annually all the time, and they find it a very secure pattern, and they don't want to disturb their economic levels and move to a higher income job or move to a same income job with more opportunities, because they fear that the money that they get might not be equivalent to the way they are getting the money right now, which is very true. And that's one of the biggest reasons that you will find people do not switch jobs, because they feel the amount of money that they're getting is, and the way that they're getting it would not be same in any of the new opportunities that they are getting. Also, the fear of the unknown. It states that change substitute ambiguity and uncertainty for the unknown, which is very true. Maximum time changes in the individual. An individual's personality does not like to change because of the fact that they feel that there is uncertainty in the new thing. There is a lot of fear of the unknown, which is very true. It could be a new project, it could be a new place, it could be a promotion, it could be a transfer that could be resisted because of the fear of the unknown. The next is the selective information processing. Individuals are guilty of selecting information processing in order to keep their perceptions intact. So there are times that people, jobs, employees, workers tend to pick up information selectively and do not process the entire thing, because that's the way that they have been doing it in the past few years. And they feel that selecting information which is only important will be incorrect. So what they do is, whenever they get a task, they completely go through that entire thing completely without missing out any details. Rather, they can save time, save energy by only picking up of what they're told in that entire unit. So this is something which employees are very guilty of, that I will not pick up this one thing. I've been told to review the thing, so I will go through every step. I will read every part of the unit, every part of the project. At times we just have to be very smart, pick up the selective information and process it, which people are not able to do it, and that's how they resist. It takes time to complete it. Obviously, a whole lot of energy, and that's why a lot of individuals state that they work a lot despite they do not, get the output of it. So these are some individual changes that are in the organization that resist changes. Not only resist changes for themselves, but on a bigger picture, even for the organization. So those are habit. Habit is obviously very personal. It's like a personality disposition, like a trait of a personality. It could be, yes, security. Economic factors are huge factors that people in nowadays also do not want to make changes, and they resist changes, not only of work but also of opportunities, also of places, and also of any new thing that they comes to them. Then there is fear of unknown and selective information processing. Apart individual individual risk changes, there are some organizational changes also, which are sources that do not allow an organization itself, do not allow an entire unit, a part of the organization, to change, and it resists changes. What are those are inertia, the limited focus for change, group inertia, threat to expertise, and threat to establish a power relationship. So let's review, let's understand all of them in terms of what are the organizational sources which are structural in nature. One is inertia. Organization have, obviously, every organization has a built-in mechanism, their way of selection, their way of pay, how amount of time does it take for people in their organization to get stable. So when an organization is confronted with a change, the structural inertia act as a counterbalance to sustain that stability. So, the entire process of the organizational system, the way it is working, the entire structure, that resists changes. That does not allow new things to come in. So it's the entire structure, the way people work, their timings, their way of working, and their way of giving the out product. So it's the entire organizational built-in feature that resists changes. Then we have limited focus of change. Organization consists of number of independent system. It's an interdependent system, which is very true. One thing can go wrong, it can impact another 10 thing in an organization. So one can't be changed without affecting the others. So limited changes in the subsystems tends to nullify and compare obviously by the larger system, which is very true. Who's getting something which is something which is as per the generation and the trends of the organization, but the bigger system resisted those changes by not making it happen. They resisted by not letting those opportunities seep in. Then there is group inertia. Even if individuals want to change, obviously the group behavior is to act according to the norm, act according to the group. So if there are two people in the group who wants to, organize something for the entire workplace, but the other seven in the group out of the nine says that no, it's not a great idea. It's going to extend our day to 2 hours more. So if the leaving time is 5, we might be getting over by 7, and most of them would not be happy with them, and two people will not be able to make those changes. So what will happen? That would be constrained, because the norm of the group is that we all leave by 5. Why wait till 7 and consume that much of energy? So that is something will again resist change, and group inertia will not let make changes. Remember, as we discussed even ahead, changes are not always negative. Some changes are really positive, really, really positive, and it's beneficial. Like like for example, getting up something new as an opportunity might be a threat to the organization. It could be something which is not beneficial. So the larger system makes sure, because of their experience and expertise, to not pick that up and resist it and let the company go on. Then we have another point, which is threat to expertise. This is changes in the organizational pattern may threaten the expertise of expertise of the specialized group, which is very true. Speaking of the organizational patterns may threaten the expertise. Obviously, at times, the pattern of the way the organization is working does threaten the specialized group. So that also at times resist a lot of changes. Because of that threat, we do not probably move in that way. We do not let in us interact, or let, like for example, there are some specialized groups in the organization, some people who are highly qualified, and so the organization system is such that most of the malfunction of the organization does not reach to them, so that the balance of that specialized group does not get disturbed. So that's another way of resisting changes in the organization. Then there is threat to establish power relationship. Any redirection or of decision making authority can threaten the long established power relationship within the organization. So we try to reduce that. There are times that whenever decisions are being, like for example, pandemic was a huge, as I always keep quoting the example of pandemic, a lot of organization did give an opportunity to younger lot and the youth to make changes and decide for the things. So at times these decision making that is coming can threaten the power which is held for a number of years in the organization. So that can also be a possibility which resisted changes, that we do not let the highest of authority, which has been working here for 10 to 15 years, be threatened or be what do you call this, demeaned of their abilities and capacities by the new group, which is like the youth and the ones who's creative, filled with energy. So they also make sure that this power relationship does not threat either of the two. The decision making, which is the new one, and also the ones who are standing there as power people for a long time. So these are some organizational changes that we have, and we had individual changes. Organizational changes you will find automatically functions. Like if there's a change which is coming to the organization, without you knowing, that change is resisted. But when we talk about an individual or source, like the one that we were speaking of before, this is something which is within us as an employee, as a worker. So that can more be traced and visible than the group changes, because group changes are so embedded in the organization that it's very difficult to make sure and to find identify that are they really resisting changes or not. But ultimately they are. So this is organizational changes. Let's now understand if you want to manage these changes. Those were sources that at time when the decision making by the new youth is being taken, it might threaten the power holding authority or the management which has been there for 10 years. Your habit of doing things which is not letting the new thing come in the organization, a habit of working for 10 hours which could be finished within 5 hours. So these are some changes that could be managed. So it could be managed by education and communication. It is important to be educated and communicate the proposed changes to the employees. This form of targeted communication obviously can reduce the resistance of anything. First, it will reduce the miscommunication and the poor communication which is happening between the two people. Second, it could be very clear. It could lead to a lot of clarity and an urgency of chance that this is the need that we want to we are making changes for. So justifying the goal and the aim also will be an outproduct of education and communication. Another way that we can manage change is participation and involvement. So it's like being a part of a process that makes you responsible for it, and thus decreasing the chances of resisting the process. Like if we want to make sure that the youth of the organization gets an opportunity, and not the specialized group always takes it away and does not let the creative innovative bunch speak out anything. So we give the responsibility to the specialized and the managerial group that you need to make sure that these people make the decisions for the forthcoming things. So now something that was actually resisting change now becomes a way of managing change. So that is, however, this process is very time consuming, but it could lead to bad decisions also. There could be possibilities that we giving the entire opportunity to the youth can disturb the equilibrium, but it's a very very effective process of making the two work together. Then others could be facilitation and support. Change may lead to apprehension and discomfort, and it requires change in routine, a lot of adjustment. So there are times that we require a lot of support of one another to make changes or to manage changes. Then developing positive relationship. This is like a key in an organization system. I feel support and facilitation is more individual, and developing a positive relationship is more something which is more group wise. The more the group has compassion for one another, working for one another, the better is going to be an opportunity which comes in and does not resist change. It will rather be able to manage those changes and very fairly lead to the output for the employees and the organization. The next is implementing changes fairly. Fairness of a procedure is an important is as important as an outcome. So we need to know that everything which comes in is very fairly implemented, and it leads to, when the outcome is negative, the question of the procedure fairness becomes very important. So it is important that whatever that is implemented is very fair, because if there are some changes and some pitfall in the process of changes, it would be visible in the outcome. Then the outcome is going to be negative. So, and the outcome will, question the entire procedure that you've used. So it's very important to be fair. It's very important to be transparent and no biases. That's another way of managing change. Then selecting people who can actually accept and make changes, who are adjustable, are dynamic in nature, whose personality traits are not fearful. They are a little risk takers. I feel such personality traits pushes managing change. Then we have cohesion. Cohesion is obviously the bond between the group needs to be very close, very good. If the bond between the group is very close, I feel a little bit of individual traits and sources can be managed because of a good level of cohesion, support, facilitation among the group members. So these are some ways that we can manage change in an organization, which is if there's any resistance that's coming in, we can take care of that. Now, moving ahead, there are some model of organizational changes that came in. So we all know that organizational changes are a part. Changes could be in the individual, changes could be in the entire organization. So Kurt Lewin's model has been a three-stage model process of organizational change, and it comprises of three bigger forces. One is unfreezing, then is the change, and then is rephrasing. You can see even the image which will support all of you. So let's start that there is an organizational changes that is coming in. Is organizational obviously is a state of status quo that can be changed by applying any of these forces. So how is organizational change proposed according to Kurt Lewin? The first process that we talk about is unfreezing. So unfreezing is the stage where there is a little bit of equilibrium which is still there, and there are driving force and restraining force which is within the unfreezing stage. So driving force it is the force which is responsible for driving away organization from that status quo. So these are those forces which actually wants to not let the equilibrium be balanced. It wants to bring about some changes to increase the driving force. So see, why do we bring about changes in an organization? We bring it so that we are able to, bring in the new opportunities, bring in the new trends and changes in the organization system. So when we talk about the driving forces, it is a change that wants to change the equilibrium, and changing of equilibrium is leading to disequilibrium, but then to increase this driving force. After this is retaining force, retaining for restraining force. These are those forces which hinder the movement away from status quo. By decreasing the restraining force, desired changes can be brought in the organization. So these forces hinder the movement away from the status quo. So it makes sure, let's take an example, that there's this bridge that we have, and this bridge is something which is the force. So the unfreezing first, which is the driving force, will make sure that it moves the bridge, makes changes in the bridge. So that once the changes will be there, there's going to be disequilibrium, the bridge will be stopped, the commutation from the bridge will be stopped. And the restraining force, like the term suggests, makes sure that nothing around the bridge takes place. No construction, nothing. So the movement around the bridge needs to be always functional. So that's what the restraining force tries to does. Any changes around them, they try to decrease it. That no, they will not let any change happen. Then the last part of the unfreezing is by applying a combination of forces. So there can be a possibility in the unfreezing that we have driving forces also, and we have restraining forces working together. After the first, which is unfreezing, where we do require the engagement of the employee, knowledge sharing, we come to something which is change processes or movement when the actual implementation has happened. So it's considered the implementation stage. During this stage, change is implemented. Employees learn new behavior, values, and expectation. This change is also referred to us as transitioning or moving stage. So when we are talking about the transitioning or the moving stage, this is actually the implementation that the change is brought about and it is implemented in the organization, and this is referred to as the transition or the moving stage. So let's take an example that the HR has decided that they are going to change the entire middle section with the new number of members, which are going to get a new status quo, which is a new, a group or a new, brand value of the organization is this group which is getting. So it tries to get about the entire new number of employees, and the HR implements it. The employees are hired. So the implementation is this, which is the change process where knowledge sharing, doing things, moving, transitioning takes place. It is this stage that most employees struggle. Obviously, remember, if we get about around 5 to 6 new employees which are holding the brand, a bigger value in the organization, suddenly it will bring about changes. It will bring about a lot of employee struggle of managing with one another. So that is something which is a change process or movement. Then we move to something which is rephrasing again. That this is rephrasing, considered as rephrasing. This stage is considered as one of the most stable state, which is in regard to the equilibrium. So after the struggle is over, the implementation is correct. The value based employees that have just shifted to the organization has already been there for 1 month or 2 months. They started giving the out product. Some steps will be taken, to make this change a part of the employee's behavior and thus stopping it to revert back. So the HR now will make sure that there's a lot of interaction between the new group and the older group. So they will make sure that this entire group just moves back, starts showing absenteeism or starts leaving. So they make sure there's high coaching, there's high training, there's a whole lot of compassion and interaction between these two groups, so that this stage is actually retaining all its equilibrium. So that's called the refreezing. Obviously, we start with unfreezing, then there are change processes, then we rephrase again. So when we rephrase again, we are maintaining the equilibrium system by getting coached, trained, positive rewards, acknowledgement by the young and the old. That's how an organization gets back to its normal functioning, back again according to Kurt Lewin's model. So that's how Kurt Lewin stated that an organizational change can be incorporated without making much changes, but also being a benefit to the organization. Now, we move to a whole new, unit here. Today, in this unit, we are going to talk about organizational culture. Organizational culture is one of the most important and significant component of an organization that can never be missed. Which not only determines that how your employees are working in an organization, but what are the rules, what are the norms, what's the mission, what is the agenda behind the organization, like what are their goals, their norms, their mission, how old it is. So that's an organization culture. This culture has some components that we will study today. This culture also has some cultural theories that tell us that how different organizational cultural processes function. So today we are going to start with organization, unit 10 of organizational culture. So what is it? A very significant component of organization which not only determines the behavior, but also determines the mission, the focus, the aim and the vision and the norm of the organization. What do we understand by culture itself? Culture is a system of formal rules and that spells out how an individual must behave, how an individual needs to be in a group or in a in a place that they move out. So this was given by Kennedy and Deal in 1980. Organizational culture is a very significant component as we spoke about. When we say in Unit 10, moving from change to organizational culture, culture is a significant component which will define your behavior, the mission of the organization. On a culture, you open a website of an organization, that's like the organization, their aim, their goals, their mission, their norms. So Unit 10 will talk about what is organizational culture, what are its component, how important it is, and the various theories that we have in an organizational culture. So now, what is culture? Culture is an unsaid rule and which comprises of norms, clarity of direction, organizational reach, we have integration, we have top management contact, we have conflict resolution, we have performance clarity, performance emphasis, action orientation, compensation, and HR resource development. So see, HR resource development compensation were getting a lot of importance in 1988. 1983, which was given by Lycan and Killen and Sackton, stated that the task support, task innovation, personal freedom, and space relationship is equally important. So, see, the number of culture here given by Kylie was very less, but something which should not be even missed. Task innovation, task freedom, social relationship, personal freedom should not be missed. So, this completes with some and few components of organizational culture. And let's see, even if we have more, apart Kyle and Jordan and Likert, you have many in your book stated. Something will directly, indirectly have all of this: a cultural atmosphere, a culture mission. What is the team approach? What is their communication style, decision making, the kind of atmosphere of the organization, and the performance. So that is indirectly, directly the culture of an organization. So let's understand, as I said, why it is important and how does it develop? How does an organization culture actually takes form in an organization? So leaders as role model are one of the most important part of culture, organizational culture. So, leaders as role model, the first step is to start with a leader who has established or shaped the organization in past. And according to Sheen in 1990, the values, the goals, the behavior of the founding leader work as a role model for fellow employees. Let's take an example for Tata Group. I think Ratan Tata does turn out to be a leader as a role model who actually tells us what his organization holds as a mission, not only today as a as a 2000, but in 1990s and 90s 30s also by his own fathers as JD Tata, before we had Ratan Tata. So the entire mission has been intact as a leader by Tata Group. So that's again a very important factor that they mentioned to form a cultural organization culture. Then role of a critical event, Sheen stated again in 1990, suggested that culture is a form of critical incidents. Important events are important to be learned and about desirable, undesirable behavior, which is very true. Yearly planner, whether an important course of changes that comes in becomes a very important, uh, lesson for both desirable changes and undesirable changes. So critical events are important in an organization that forms a critical, a culture, organizational culture. Then effective working relationship. Fordham and Gunter in 1993 pointed out that the need to form an effective working relationship actually reflects the organizational culture. So remember, the atmosphere is coming from an effective working relationship that not only demarcates the relationship, the compassion between the employees, but the values that are established and the expectations from one another. Not from the employee and the heads, but also from the employees and employees, which is your colleagues that we have. Then we have last is what can form organizational culture and give us form. It's the external environment, such as the government policy, the social situation, the labor laws, and the dynamics in the way, even the budget, I feel, in nowadays makes a lot of changes for a lot of companies. So, which is obviously an ever changing factor that will keep forming the culture, organizational culture now and then. So this how it looks, how an organizational culture forms, which is the philosophy of the founder, which is the role model, a selecting criteria, which is the critical roles that we have. Then we have the socialization process, the relationship, and the organizational culture comes into play through top management, how we socialize, how the externals are impacting, and an organizational culture comes into form. Now, moving. Let's come to the levels of culture. This was again Sheen's model. We have come down to different theories now, as suggested. So we are starting with the Sheen's model to begin with. When speaking of Sheen's model, according to Edgar Sheen, who has spoken a lot about what is organizational culture is a norm. He says it comprises of the values of the people. It also talks about the underlying assumption. So, according to Edgar Sheen in 1984, organizational culture comprises of three levels, namely an artifact, a value based level, and the assumption as level. So, he stated that we have these three levels ranging from tangible to deeply embedded ones. So starting from, so obviously the first one, which is artifact, is the tangible one, and the last one would be something which is an assumption which is deeply stated in everyone's behavior, which is very true. The first is something which would be different to people and can obviously change with the passage of time. But as from the former to the latter is something which the passage of time becomes more embedded in people. It becomes a reflection in everyone's behavior and everyone's ways of working. Now, let's start with artifact. Any aspect of an organization that is visible and tangible is a part of artifact. The dress code of the employee, the office furniture, the facilities, the behavior of the employee, the mission and the vision of under will all come under artifact. So we all know that there are changes in the mission, there are changes in the employee structure, there are changes in the way we dress up. So I'm so sure that we go down to our early times of teaching processes, the dress code was so very simple. We all saw teachers clad in saris, and today there are formals also, which gives a very modern, a very sophisticated look to our teaching profession. Not only because we have international schools, we do not have CBSE, but also international schools. So, do you see tangibility of these things can change? And the mission has changed under the same organization also at times. Now, let's move to the second level. The second level is the espoused beliefs and values. These beliefs and values are proposed obviously by the leader, and later has been adopted by every member, following, coordinate, or employees of the organization. See, the value work as the guiding principle. We all know that values can get modified, but they do not change. So when we talk, as they mentioned, it's from the above, the latter one will be deeply embedded in everyone's behavior. So as soon as you join an organization, I feel value is something which is directly taken as on the face way of the value. So the value of the organization is to timely the completing project work, timely submissions, and that's what something everyone is doing in an organization. You will find that this value, being good or bad, will be taken up by everyone. There can be modification. So when we talk about modification, modification is there can be possibilities that there could be variation of the way the value is being reflected in everybody, but the core remains the same. So that's the espoused beliefs or values, and the last is the basic assumption, the underlying assumption which is present behind the behavior representing the deepest level in the organization. So these assumptions are usually unwritten. At times, they are taken for granted by the group members, thus non-negotiable. And according to Sheen, again in 1984, basic assumptions are so taken for granted that someone who do not hold them is viewed as a foreigner, and the one who holds them is taken as to someone who is important. So people who do not take this basic assumption, so for example, there's a basic underlying feature of the organization which is there, and if you do not understand that basic thought of the organization, you'll be considered a deviant, you'll be considered crazy, you'll be considered someone who does not understand the processes of the organization. So this is how an organizational culture, according to Edward Sheen, looks like. So, as we talk about Edward Sheen's concept, he stated there are three levels in the culture, organization culture. We had artifacts, we have as beliefs, and we had basic assumptions. From the tangible to something which is deeply embedded. When we talk about deeply embedded, you can always say that the deeply embedded ones are just taken the way they are on the face value. We do not make changes in them. We do not make changes in the mission of the organization once we join. We rather adapt to it, we take over it. So that completes with Sheen's model. Let's move, as you can see the image also. Let's move to the other, and the image will give you more clarity before we move ahead. So the artifacts are the visible organizational structure, as I said, the dress code, the structure, the looking of the organization, the furniture, the facilities. Values could be the goals, it could be the vision, which are communicated to the employees very directly. And assumptions and beliefs are something which is subconscious, unconsciously embedded in you. It's an unwritten rule. It's as soon as you get into the organization, it would be the way it is managing conflict, deciding for people, finalizing projects. It's just like signals that you need to watch out for. So they are assumptions. They are a little unconsciously taken up. They are, and because of being not stated, they are taken for granted also. And if you do not understand them, you'll be taken as a deviant, a crazy individual who does not understand simple concepts and assumptions of the organization. Now, moving ahead, we have, after Sheen's model of cultural change and organizational culture, there are ways we need to learn the organizational culture. What are the different ways that we can learn about the organization culture? So I'll give you an example. You go and you join a job. The job, let's talk about as being an organizational psychologist. They have asked for an organizational psychologist, the employer, which mutually takes over the HR responsibilities also. And you entering to the organization, how can you understand the culture of the organization? These are ways that you can understand the organizational culture. Stories, rituals, material symbols which are present around, and the kind of language that people are using, and all of this. The image at the side is also furthermore. So let's talk about some stories. These are stories of the founders, of the success and the failures, important events in the organization, what lead to this organization come into such form. So that's something which are stories about the organization. Then there are rituals. Rituals are repeated patterns of activity that represent an organization's values. It further informs employees what goals are important, which people are important in their organization. So these are some rituals that, see, we will have these members as the CEO, then we have board members. So after that, we'll have another head meeting. So these are some, major pattern of activities, probably the major events in the organization, how they are happening, what all opportunities you will get yearly, like a pattern. So that's like a ritual. Then we have materialistic symbols. Material symbols. Material symbols are something which is more visible and evidently available in front of you of an organizational culture. It deals with questions such as, how does corporate headquarters look like? How do organization treat CEOs and fellow employees? What kind of perks are given? So these are some material symbols that you have. What kind of power structure we have in the organization. Then we have language. Language is quite important and crucial. That actually helps you identify the cultural expectations, help you identify how are people interacting and working in an organization. Power structure, your routines and ritual, the control system, how many number of levels are there in the organization. All of this will help you understand the culture as soon as you enter in an organization. So as a snapshot, it could be myths and stories. Organizational structure can help you. Power structures can help you. Control systems can help you. Language can help you. Material symbols can help you. Routines and the ritual of that environment can help you understand the organizational culture. Now, moving ahead for culture, how do we assess culture? Are there ways that we are assessing culture? Yes, there are ways that we are assessing culture. There are some inventories that I'm going to name for you. It isn't something that you need to learn by heart. If you enter into the organizational field, would be some that you can utilize. Organizational cultural inventory given by Cook and Haffrey in 1987 is a questionnaire, has four orientation: power, role, tasks, and self. So this is the four that it will assess and tell you. Then there is Harrison's organizational ideology questionnaire that we have. So this ideology questionnaire of Harrison in 1975 assesses ideology of organization in terms of power, role, task, and individuals. Consists of just 15 items, which is 15 questions. Then we have another corporate culture questionnaire, which was given by Walker, Simon, and Davis in 1996. It measures four principles, which is organizational culture, under the organizational culture, performance, human resources, decision making, and the interpersonal relationships. So again, a very different, components that we have, which is being tested. Then we have core employee opinion questionnaire given by Hoffman and Bunkiman in 2000. It's not very old. It has 13 items, which is 13 questions. That's all. And a lot of different issues of organizational cultures are assessed in this questionnaire. Now, Hofstede's organizational culture questionnaire, it was given in 1919. Again, a very important questionnaire. It again assesses the organizational culture, and it's instrumental longer than the other instrument. So other instrument has 15 and 20 questions. It might have somewhere around 50 and more. So that was Hofstede's in 1990. Then we have organizational cultural survey. We even have a survey apart the questionnaire, which was given by a lot of people. Glasser, Hacker in 1987. 6 factors that it's assessing: teamwork, conflict, climate and morale, information flow, involvement, supervisions, and meetings. So I feel this, the last one, surveys are actually questioning you about a lot of relevant, functionable, and visible items. How are you involved? What kind of meetings, supervision, morale of the entire organizational culture, climate and conflict, teamwork. So these are few inventories and surveys that you can remember of how we are assessing organizational culture. So if a question comes in and you are asked, and you have to be known that what is organizational culture and is it assessed? Yes, it is assessed. It is a quantifiable attribute of an organization. Now, after we assess organizational culture, let's move to a new unit that we have as organizational development. Organizational development after culture is equally important. So remember, we understood what were changes to sum up today. Then we spoke about the culture, how it is formed. Now we have organizational development. In 1969, this was given by Binnie's and stated that any response to change or any nuanced educated strategy that updates the belief, the structure, the values of the organizations to allow them to better adapt to the changing times. So these are the development are usually responses to the changes that are happening, which gives rise to new belief, new structure, new values. Maybe at times it could give rise to a new aim for the organization. So what would be the objective of organizational development that we are going to go through? We are going to explain you what is it, what is its relevance, some historical development that happened in OD, which is organizational development. There were some important models, which are theories, and some interventions, like how do you see it happening in an organization. So let's understand there are some factors that contribute to the need, the need for the organizational development strategies. First, we need to know that a lot of organizational development happens because of the trend changes. So the first way that OD happens in an environment is globalization, international market, government policies, leadership, interaction with different companies. Second, technology. Technology has given a huge change in our country, also from past 2-3 years, which results to globalization, innovation, new forms of organization policies and rules and interaction, which was again supported by Body and Cummings in 2009. So see, what is the main aim of organizational development? It wants to increase the productivity and efficiency, create a very new culture, innovative cultural, organizational culture, and increase the profit margin for everybody, individuals and organizations both. So don't you see an OD is such an important factor in an organization? Now, let's move to what the OD stemming up from five backgrounds. So it was say that organizational development came up from where? So this background involved innovation, applied insights. It came out from the training of Kurt Lewin in 1946. So OD was first, spoken about in 1947 in a training laboratory process by Kurt Lewin and his colleagues. Then there were action researchers and feedback background, the second movement, where the evolution of organizational development took place, and the pioneer is Kurt Lewin. And in 1940s, beside Kurt Lewin, the entire movement was processed by John Collier, Edward Hamilton. They showed that research for organizational improvement can only meet its goals if it is collaborated with the actions of the organizational members, which is very true. Any change needs its members' contribution also. So if there are changes coming in, Kurt Lewin and its colleagues stated that these changes in response that we are talking to towards the change has to be supported by the actions of consultant and the members of the organization. Then there were normative background studies which was done by Likert, and a lot of studies gave us four categories where the organization fell into: exploitative authoritative system, consultative system, benevolent authoritative system, and participative. The fourth category, which is the participative system, was considered to be the ideal one. Obviously, I feel the authoritative is going to be very exploitative also. That's why it's mentioned like that. Benevolent is going to be where the authority doesn't function well. And consultative is something which is supported by an outsource. A person who keeps coming as a consultative, that gives you a system. The last is participative, which happens in consideration with building bridges between the organization's culture's ideal and your setting. So it's like everyone working together towards an organizational development, which is participative, like the term suggests. The setting, the organizational ideals, the organizational members, the values, everything coming together. So I feel the participative system is one of the best systems that we have in the OD. So this is how the historical stemming background happened. There were laboratory training, there were research feedbacks, normative approaches came in, and the quality of work and strategy changed. So productivity and quality of work background came in. There were a lot of researches by Eric Twist and Taviston in the Taviston Institute, TITHS, relationship in London, that targeted the amalgamation of people and technology, which is, if we want to increase the quality of work, we have to get the best of both worlds. Effort of people and technology, the running changes, the trends of employees. So both manual and automatic needs to come together, which increases productivity and quality of work also. And the last is strategic change background. As a technological, social, political environment of the organization becomes very complex and interlaced, the need of planned change processes was observed at the system level. This was pioneered by social scientists Richard Picard, Eric Trist, and Kim Bamford, that believe that the organization comprises of both technical and social element also. So by the end, when we talk about the OD's evolution, strategic change spoke about that, obviously quality of work already came in, technology already walked in, but they also mentioned technical and social. Both are equally important when we talk about an organizational development. So we need to have the technical system and the interaction of people in multi levels equally important. So that completes this particular. Let's move to a few models that we have. What are most selling of our organization? And simple Kurt Ruin's three-stage model, again back to the same thing. Stated the same: unfreezing, change, and rephrase. Unfreezing is organization has its own norm. The first step is to loosen the practice, let some disequilibrium come in. The force directs the employee to employ behaviors to move away from the rigid practices, try their innovative ways, not go through the stepwise pattern, but find something new. Manage and understand concept, let your doubts arise. So disequilibrium is the unfreezing. Then comes the change, plan the change. The actual implementation happens here. So one would expect changes at this level. First level, we understood that you understand people's behavior, you understand the change, you understand the differences. The second is the structural level, where the changes are happening. The employees are learning new ways now. They've understood the old pattern can be changed. Disequilibrium has happened. They learn the new ways. In an organization, the older employees also giving examination and test, sitting for workshops, sitting for training programs. That's the change, implementation. And that change will bring about what? Stability back again. We tend to refreeze the organization. Changes will be reinforced. There will be stabilization. We obtain the equilibrium again. The trained people come back. They get those norms back in place. They work in a different way, achieve success, equilibrium again maintained, and success achieved. So it's unfreeze, change, and refreezing. Disequilibrium, change management, and equilibrium. So that's again Kurt Wayne's very simple model, which happened even in the culture and even in something that we talk, even in change and in organization development. Now, another model was the action research model by Levin again in 1946. They again stated a three-stage model. After the three-stage model of him, he stated another, action research model, which comprised of 7 steps, which was supported by Cumming and Wallis in 2009. So the approach here was the agent of change and the target and the client. So who's the change, who's making the change, and where is the change happening? So how does it? It's not what you get, it's telling you the process of change, the developmental change that you're doing. So it's identification of the problem, which is the first step begins when the you identify the problem in an organization. Second is consultation with the behavioral expert. So once you identify, you pick up the people who are responsible for it and consult. Then data gathering, clear information that you pick up from the primary sources, and you start working onto it. Once you do it, there's going to be a lot of analysis that will take, and you'll identify that this is the source that needs to be changed. After data gathering, there is feedback from the client. Feedback, this reflects that what has been done till now, what is the diagnostic, like following the information gathering, the OD practitioner gives feedback on the diagnostic findings in the first meeting, that what the problem identified was correct or not, and did you get the right advice, was the planning done right. That's how the feedback happens. So it's a merger of the two. If you check Kurt Lewin's two processes coming together, this one has feedback, the action research model. The other one, which was freezing, unfreezing, did not have the feedback. So this is the same model telling you the process, whereas in the other one, we tell you only what in terms of levels. This is the entire process. Now, after feedback of the client, we move to something which is joint diagnosis. There is a diagnose problem. I'll give you an example for this to make it more clear. So let's take an example. There is technology, something which is running as a problem in the organization. Problem identified. A lot of them do not know how to manage and hold technology. Consulted behavioral expertise and employees. People said we need to train the new ones and let the older ones who already know the technology supervise the process. That's something which is the consultation advice that we are getting. Now, prelim diagnosis and data gathering. We need to know from everybody what is not known. So the level which is not having technological knowledge, they've given a survey. We diagnose that how much effort of training do they require. That's like the preliminary diagnose that you've done. After this, when you check the survey, you realize that this is the feedback. I need to work as not everyone will require one trainer, but two trainers would be sufficient because some has a very prelim beginner level and the other are at more than the beginner level. So that's something which is the feedback of the group. After that, the feedback, we have a joint diagnosed problem that training is must for technology in an organization. So lack of technology understanding is something that should never be missed. Also remember that diagnosis could be jeopardized if there are communication gaps. So remember this diagnose, which we have done, that we need a multi-level training for technology can go wrong if people say that no multi-level but training is required. So see, diagnosis needs to be communicated really well. Joint action is required for the final process. Once the training is driven, the action is implemented. Remember, the cultural change that comes in is going to be beautiful. So that's how OD happens. Organizational development happens in an organization. So during the pandemic, when people were not having, technology as their forte, were made to learn. They were given workshops and training, and that's how today the entire world, education to organization to any system, is working on the laptop, and we are taking classes similarly on the same. So I hope the entire process and understanding was good. Let's just do a final run through of this today of what we did to have a better understanding. We started with what was resistance, cultural resistance. Cultural resistance is any change that is brought about in the organization. That's what we started with. It can be both positive, negative, and it has some sources. We have individual sources and we have organization. After change, cultural change, we come to managing change. We can manage change by better communication, cohesion, training, etc. And after the management of change, we move to something which is organizational culture. Culture is something which is very important. It talks about the mission, the aim, the structure, the members, the forte, the vision of the organization. Every organization must have a culture, because without a culture, remember, your organization doesn't function. Kurt Lewin gave its OD development model, and before that, when we talk about cultural, there were multiple ways of assessing a culture. There were ways how do we develop culture. So there are culture development process, there is culture assessment process, and I repeat, organizational culture is something that can be assessed. So you can assess a culture by inventories, by questionnaires and surveys given by psychologists, which will have different line of checking of its own. After organizational culture, we came into something which is organizational change. It's something change. Change is a big process that we spoke about right now. Change, after organizational change to organizational culture, we came to organizational development. Development is happening within the organization. It has models, it has ways of development, and why it is important. And why does OD takes place? First, because of globalization. Second, remember technology. We just did it. I go back to the page for you. The three factors: globalization, technology, and the managerial innovation. We need to make sure that our managerial procedure is always creative and innovative. That finishes with Lewin's OD development model, with Kurt Lewin's, with the second Kurt Lewin's model that we have. We will continue with organizational development and their models in the next class. Hope the class were understandable. We all were able to understand that how cultural change, organizational culture, and development happens, and extremely important for you to know as an organizational psychologist. Thank you, everyone.